a quiet little town surrounded by rolling hills and endless fields, there lived a girl named Maya. She wasn't like the other kids at school. She didn't laugh loudly during recess or join in on games of tag. Instead, she preferred to sit, alone under the big oak tree near the playground, sketching pictures in her worn-out notebook. Her drawings were filled with magical worlds, faraway galaxies, and brave heroes who fought against impossible odds. To Maya, these imaginary places felt more real than the life she lived every day. Maya's parents worked long hours at jobs they didn't enjoy, often coming home too tired to talk or even notice their daughter sitting quietly in the corner of the living room. They loved her, but they were so caught up in trying to make ends meet that they rarely had time for her. This left Maya feeling invisible, as though she didn't matter to anyone. Not her family, not her teachers, and certainly not her classmates. At school, things were even worse. Maya was an easy target for bullies. She was shy and soft-spoken, always keeping to herself. Her clothes weren't trendy like the ones the popular kids wore. Instead, she dressed in hand-me-downs from her cousins. Her backpack had patches stitched over holes, and her shoes were scuffed from years of use. These small differences made her stand out in all the wrong ways. A group of older students, led by a boy named Jake, took notice of her almost immediately. After she started middle school, Jake was tall and athletic with a cocky grin that seemed permanently plastered across his face. He ruled the hallways like a king, flanked by his loyal followers who laughed at his jokes no matter how cruel they were. When Jake decided someone was boring or weird, he made sure everyone else thought so too. And unfortunately, for Maya, she quickly became one of his favorite targets. It started with small things. Whispers behind her back when she walked into class, giggles whenever she raised her hand to answer a question. Then it escalated. One day, as Maya sat in the cafeteria eating her peanut butter sandwich, Jake walked over and snatched her lunch bag right out of her hands. "What is this? Bread and jelly?" he sneered, holding it up for everyone to see. His friends erupted into laughter while Maya stared at him, her face burning with shame. Without saying a word, she got up and ran out of the cafeteria, tears streaming down her cheeks. The bullying didn't stop there. Every day brought new torment. Sometimes Jake and his gang would push her into lockers between classes, leaving dents in the metal doors and bruises on her arms. Other times they'd trip her in the hallway, causing her books to scatter across the floor as people stepped over them without helping. Once they even spread rumors about her, telling everyone she had lice just because her hair looked messy after gym class. No matter what they did, Maya never fought back. She simply endured it, hoping that if she stayed quiet, they'd eventually grow bored and leave her alone. But they didn't. If anything, their attacks grew worse. One particularly cold afternoon, Maya stayed late at school to finish a project for art class. As she headed toward the bus stop afterward, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw Jake and two of his friends approaching. Panic surged through her chest as she realized she was completely alone. There was no teacher nearby, no crowd of students to hide among. Just her and the three boys closing in. "Well, well, look who we found," Jake said, smirking. "Little, Miss Nobody." Maya tried to step back, but one of the boys grabbed her arm, pulling her closer. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just let me go." Jake laughed. "Why should we? You're such a loser, Maya. Nobody likes you anyway." His words cut deeper than any punch could have. Maya wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but she couldn't move. The boys circled her like predators, taunting her until finally, they shoved her hard enough that she fell onto the ground. Scraped knees and dirty palms stung as she scrambled to get up. But before she could, Jake kicked dirt into her face. "That's what you deserve," he spat before walking away, leaving her lying there in the freezing mud. For what felt like hours, Maya stayed on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. The world around her felt cold and empty, as though it had turned its back on her entirely. Cars drove past without stopping. Neighbors peeked out of their windows but chose to ignore her plight. Even the sky seemed indifferent, clouds heavy, with rain casting a gray shadow over everything. Eventually, Maya forced herself to stand. Her body ached, her clothes were soaked, and her heart felt shattered into a million pieces. But as she limped home, something inside her began to shift. For years she had believed the lies the bullies told her, that she was worthless, unlovable, and weak. But now, as she replayed the events of the day in her mind, anger began to replace despair. Why should she believe them? Why should she let them dictate how she saw herself? By the time Maya reached her house, her tears had dried, replaced by a fierce determination blazing in her eyes. She wasn't going to let them win anymore. She didn't know how yet, but she vowed to change, to become someone stronger, braver, and unafraid to stand up for herself. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Maya made a silent promise to herself. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow she would start fighting back, not with fists, but with courage, resilience, and an unshakable belief in her own worth. And so, in the darkness of her room, surrounded by shadows cast by the moonlight streaming through her window, Maya began to dream, not of faraway worlds or magical adventures, but of a future where she was no longer afraid. Little did she know, this moment marked the beginning of a journey that would transform not only her life, but the lives of countless others who needed hope. The next morning, Maya didn't wake up to the sound of her alarm clock. Instead, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the previous day over and over again in her mind. The laughter of Jake and his friends echoed in her thoughts, their cruel words cutting deeper than any physical wound ever could. But this time, something was different. For the first time in her life, Maya felt a strange kind of clarity. A spark that had been buried deep within her for years was beginning to ignite. She got out of bed slowly, her body still sore from the fall, but her spirit felt lighter somehow. As she stood in front of the mirror brushing her hair, she looked at her reflection carefully. The girl staring back at her wasn't weak or powerless. She just hadn't realized her strength yet. That realization sent a shiver down her spine. Today, she decided, would not be like yesterday. Instead of heading straight to school, Maya grabbed her backpack and walked outside. She wandered aimlessly through the quiet streets of her neighborhood, letting her feet guide her away from the suffocating walls of her home and the memories of the playground. Eventually, she found herself on a narrow dirt path leading into the woods behind her house. It was a place she used to visit as a child when she needed to escape reality, a hidden world where no one could find her. The forest was alive with sounds. Birds chirped cheerfully above her head, leaves rustled softly in the breeze, and sunlight filtered through the trees, creating golden patches on the ground. Maya sat down beneath an ancient oak tree, leaning against its sturdy trunk. She pulled out her sketchbook and began drawing absent-mindedly, letting her pencil glide across the paper without thinking too hard about what she was creating. Slowly, shapes started to form. An image of a girl standing tall, surrounded by light, breaking free from chains wrapped around her wrists. As she sketched, Maya allowed herself to think about everything that had happened to her. She thought about the loneliness she'd felt growing up, the way her parents worked so much they barely noticed her existence, and the endless taunts from bullies who seemed determined to crush her spirit. But instead of wallowing in sadness, Maya focused on one question: what can I do to change this? It wasn't enough to simply wish things were better. She needed a plan, a way to take control of her life and stop being a victim. Over the next few days, Maya threw herself into research. She spent hours watching videos online about self-defense techniques, confidence-building exercises, and strategies for dealing with bullies. At first, it felt overwhelming. How could someone like her, who had always been so timid, possibly stand up to people like Jake? But the more she learned, the more empowered she felt. One evening, while scrolling through YouTube, Maya stumbled upon a video titled, "How to Be Mentally Strong." Intrigued, she clicked play. The speaker talked about how mental toughness wasn't about never feeling afraid. It was about facing your fears head-on and refusing to let them control you. He shared stories of people who had overcome incredible challenges by focusing on small, manageable steps rather than trying to fix everything at once. By the end of the video, Maya's hands were shaking, not from fear but from excitement. This was exactly what she needed. Inspired, Maya decided to start journaling. Every night before bed, she wrote down everything that had happened during the day, the good, the bad, and the ugly. She poured her pain onto the pages, describing every insult, every shove, every moment of humiliation in vivid detail. And then, she added something new, a list of things she was grateful for. At first, it was hard to come up with even 3 items, but gradually, she began noticing little moments of joy she had overlooked before. A kind smile from a stranger, a beautiful sunset, the satisfaction of finishing a difficult drawing. Writing helped Maya process her emotions and gave her a sense of release. But she knew she couldn't rely on words alone to protect herself. So, she started practicing the self-defense moves she'd seen in the videos. In the privacy of her bedroom, she mimicked kicks, punches, and blocks, imagining scenarios where she might need to use them. At first she felt silly, flailing around like a clumsy fighter in a movie. But as the days went by, her movements became smoother and more confident. Each punch she threw made her feel stronger. Each kick reminded her that she had power within. Her Maya also worked on changing her mindset. She practiced standing taller, walking with purpose, and looking people directly in the eye, even if it made her uncomfortable at first. During lunch breaks, instead of hiding under the oak tree, she forced herself to sit at a table in the cafeteria. When someone glanced at her curiously, she smiled politely instead of shrinking away. These small changes might have seemed insignificant to others, but to Maya, they represented monumental shifts in her attitude. Her transformation didn't go unnoticed. One afternoon, as Maya walked down the hallway carrying a stack of books, she accidentally bumped into Sarah, a classmate she barely knew. "Oh, sorry," Maya said quickly, bending down to pick up the fallen books. To her surprise, Sarah crouched beside her and helped gather them. "No problem," Sarah replied with a friendly smile. "Hey, I've seen your drawings. They're really cool." Maya blinked in astonishment. No one had ever complimented her artwork before. "Thanks," she murmured, feeling warmth spread through her chest. That brief interaction stayed with Maya long after the bell rang. It reminded her that not everyone in the world was cruel, that kindness existed even in unexpected places. Encouraged by the encounter, Maya decided to reach out to other students who seemed lonely or isolated. She started sitting with different groups at lunch, striking up conversations with kids who usually kept to themselves. Some ignored her, but others welcomed the company, eager to connect with someone who understood what it felt like to be left out. Despite these positive developments, Maya knew the real test was yet to come. Jake and his gang hadn't forgotten about her. In fact, they were likely plotting their next attack. She could feel their eyes on her whenever she passed them in the hallways, their smirks promising retaliation. But Maya refused to let fear dictate her actions. She continued practicing her self-defense moves, visualizing scenarios where she defended herself successfully. She repeated affirmations in front of the mirror every morning. "I am strong. I am brave. I will not let them win." One Friday afternoon, as Maya was leaving school, she spotted Jake leaning against the fence near the bus stop. His 2 sidekicks stood beside him, laughing at something he'd said. Maya froze for a moment, her heart pounding wildly. Then, taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and kept walking. She didn't look away or quicken her pace. She simply walked past them as though they weren't there. Jake's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Where do you think you're going, weirdo?" Maya stopped but didn't turn around. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack as she steadied her breathing. "Home," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Jake stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "You've got some nerve showing your face around here after last time." For a split second, panic threatened to overwhelm Maya. But then she remembered all the hours she'd spent preparing for this moment. The journal entries, the practice sessions, the affirmations. She turned to face him, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Leave me alone," she said, her tone calm but resolute. "If you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did to me." Jake stared at her, clearly taken aback by her boldness. For years, he'd bullied people like Maya because they were easy targets, quiet, submissive, unwilling. to fight back. But this version of Maya was unrecognizable. Gone was the timid girl who cried at the slightest provocation. In her place stood someone fierce, unafraid, and ready to defend herself. "You think anyone cares about you?" Jake sneered, though his confidence wavered slightly. "I don't care if they do," Maya replied. "But I care about myself, and I'm done letting you hurt me." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Jake and his friends staring after her in stunned silence. As she boarded the bus, Maya felt a surge of triumph coursing through her veins. She had faced her biggest fear, and she had won. That night, as she lay in bed reflecting on the day's events, Maya realized something important. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting in spite of it. She still felt scared, but she had chosen to confront her bullies anyway, and in doing so, she had taken the first step toward reclaiming her life. Little did Maya know, this victory was only the beginning. Over the coming weeks, her newfound confidence would inspire others to stand up for themselves too. The shy, invisible girl who once hid in the shadows was becoming a beacon of hope for those who needed it most. And though challenges lay ahead, Maya was ready to face them, all because a single spark had ignited a fire within her soul. The following Monday, Maya walked into school with her head held high. She had spent the weekend practicing self-defense moves in her room, repeating affirmations in front of the mirror, and mentally rehearsing how she would handle any confrontation with Jake and his gang. Though fear still lingered in the corners of her mind, it no longer controlled her. Every step she took felt deliberate, every breath steady. For the first time in her life, Maya felt prepared to face whatever came her way. As she entered the crowded hallway, whispers rippled through the air. News of her bold stand at the bus stop had spread quickly, thanks to a few students who had witnessed the exchange. Some kids snickered, assuming Jake would retaliate sooner or later. Others looked at Maya with a mix of curiosity and admiration. Curiosity, because they'd never seen her act so confidently, and admiration because deep down they wished they could be as brave. Jake noticed the buzz too. He sat on a bench outside the cafeteria during lunch, scowling as he watched Maya walk past without so much as glancing in his direction. His pride was bruised. Not only had she stood up to him, but now people were talking about it. To someone, like Jake, whose entire identity revolved around being feared and respected, this was unacceptable. By Wednesday afternoon, Jake decided enough was enough. After gym class, when the locker rooms were nearly empty, he cornered Maya near the bleachers. His two sidekicks flanked him, their smirks mirroring his own. Maya's heart raced as she realized there was no escape this time. The dim light filtering through the windows cast long shadows across the floor, making the space feel smaller, more suffocating. Well, Jake drawled, crossing his arms over his chest. "Looks like we've got ourselves a rebel." Maya didn't respond immediately. Instead, she focused on staying calm, just as she'd practiced. Her fingers curled slightly into fists at her sides, ready to defend herself if necessary. "What do you want, Jake?" she asked, her voice firm despite the tremor threatening to creep in. "I want to know why you suddenly think you're better than everyone else," Jake snapped, taking a step closer. "You used to cry whenever I said 2 words to you. Now, you're acting like some kind of hero." Maya met his gaze squarely, refusing to back down. "I'm not trying to be a hero," she said evenly. "I'm just done letting you treat me like garbage." Jake laughed, though it sounded forced. "You really think standing up to me is going to change anything? You're still the same loser? You've always been?" "No," Maya replied, her voice rising slightly. "I'm not. Maybe I was before, but not anymore. I've spent my whole life letting people like you push me around, tell me I'm worthless, make me feel invisible. But guess what? I don't believe that anymore. And neither should anyone else." Her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. For a moment, Jake looked genuinely surprised. He hadn't expected her to fight back, not like this. Most kids cowered under his glare or begged for mercy when he threatened them. But Maya wasn't most kids. She stood there unflinching, radiating a quiet strength that made Jake uneasy. "Whatever," he muttered, shaking off his discomfort. Let's see how tough you really are." With that, he lunged forward, aiming to shove her backward onto the hard concrete floor. But Maya was ready. Drawing on everything she'd learned from countless hours of practice, she sidestepped his attack with surprising agility. As Jake stumbled past her off balance, she pivoted and delivered a swift kick to the back of his knee. The move caught him completely off guard, sending him crashing to the ground with a thud. His friends froze, stunned by what had just happened. For a split second, silence filled the room. Then Jake groaned and rolled onto his side, clutching his leg. Humiliation burned in his eyes as he stared up at Maya, who stood above him, breathing hard but composed. "Leave me alone," Maya said quietly, leaning down so only he could hear. "Next time, I won't stop." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Jake sprawled on the floor and his friends scrambling to help him up. Word of the incident spread like wildfire throughout the school. By the end of the day, everyone knew what had happened, even the teachers. Some students cheered Maya's victory, while others whispered nervously, wondering if Jake would seek revenge. But one thing was certain: Maya was no longer invisible. Over the next few days, Maya became something of a legend in the hallways. Kids who had once ignored her now greeted her with nods or smiles. Even teachers seemed to pay more attention to her, calling on her during class discussions and praising her work openly. It was as though defeating Jake had unlocked a new level of respect, and Maya soaked it all in, grateful for the support but determined not to let it go to her head. However, Maya knew her journey wasn't just about personal triumph. She wanted to help others who had faced similar struggles. During lunch breaks, she began spending time with students who often sat alone, the quiet ones, the awkward ones, the ones who reminded her of herself before she found her courage. Slowly but surely, she formed a small group of misfits who bonded over shared experiences of bullying and exclusion. One day, as they sat together under the oak tree where Maya used to hide, she suggested starting a support group. "We don't have to deal with this stuff alone," she told them earnestly. "If we stick together, we can show everyone that kindness matters more than cruelty." Her idea resonated deeply with the others. They agreed to meet regularly, sharing stories, offering advice, and creating a safe space free from judgment. Maya even brought snacks to lighten the mood, turning their gatherings into something resembling a mini-party. Over time, the group grew larger as more students joined, drawn by the promise of acceptance and understanding. Word of Maya's initiative reached the school administration. At first, the principal was skeptical. Support groups weren't exactly common in middle schools, but after seeing how much happier and more engaged the participating students were, he decided to give it a chance. He invited Maya to speak at an assembly, hoping her story might inspire others to stand up against bullying. Standing on stage in front of hundreds of students, Maya felt a flutter of nerves. Public speaking had always terrified her, but she reminded herself why she was doing this: to help others find their voices. Taking a deep breath, she began. "When I was younger," she said, her voice trembling at first, but growing stronger. With each word, "I thought I was powerless. I thought the bullies were right when they called me names or pushed me around. But then I realized something important. They only had power over me because I gave it to them. When I stopped believing their lies and started believing in myself, everything changed." She paused, scanning the sea of faces before her. Some students nodded encouragingly, while others listened intently, hanging on her every word. "You don't have to fight back physically," Maya continued. "Sometimes standing up to bullies means walking away instead of engaging, or reporting them to a trusted adult, or simply refusing to let their words define you. What matters is that you take control of your own story." When she finished speaking, the auditorium erupted into applause. Students clapped and cheered, many of them rising to their feet. Teachers wiped away tears, moved by Maya's honesty and resilience. Even Jake, sitting in the back row with his arms crossed, couldn't deny the impact of her words. After the assembly, Maya was approached by dozens of students eager to thank her or ask for advice. Among them was Sarah, the girl who had complimented her artwork weeks earlier. "You're amazing," Sarah said sincerely. "I wish I had your courage," Maya smiled warmly. "You already do," she replied. "You just have to trust yourself." In the weeks that followed, Maya continued working to make her school a better place. She collaborated with teachers to organize workshops on empathy and conflict resolution, teaching students how to resolve disputes peacefully. She also advocated for stricter anti-bullying policies, insisting that incidents be taken seriously and addressed promptly. To her surprise, the administration listened, implementing several of her suggestions. Even Jake began to change, or at least he tried. One afternoon, as Maya was leaving the library, she found him waiting for her outside. His hands were shoved into his pockets, and he avoided eye contact as he mumbled, "Look, I wanted to say sorry. For everything." Maya studied him carefully, searching for sincerity in his expression. Finally, she nodded. "Apology accepted," she said simply. "But remember, actions speak louder than words." Jake nodded, looking relieved yet humbled. From that day forward, he kept his distance, occasionally nodding in acknowledgement when their paths crossed. While he wasn't exactly friendly, he no longer sought out opportunities to torment her either. As Maya reflected on everything that had happened, she realized how far she'd come. The shy, invisible girl who once hid in the shadows had transformed into someone strong, fearless, and unafraid to stand up for herself and others. Her journey wasn't over, but she knew she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, courage wasn't something you were born with. It was something you chose again and again until it became a part of who you were. As the weeks turned into months, Maya's influence continued to grow. What had started as a small support group under the oak tree blossomed into something much larger, a movement that touched every corner of her school. Students who had once felt invisible or powerless found strength in numbers, inspired by Maya's courage and determination. Together, they created a culture of kindness and empathy that slowly but surely began to replace the fear and cruelty that had dominated the hallways for so long. Maya's leadership extended beyond organizing meetings and workshops. She became a beacon of hope for anyone struggling with bullying, loneliness, or self-doubt. Kids who had never spoken to her before approached her between classes, sharing their stories and seeking advice. Some confided in her about being teased for their appearance, while others revealed deeper struggles, feeling abandoned by their families, battling anxiety, or dealing with grief after losing loved ones. No matter what they shared, Maya listened, without judgment, offering words of encouragement and reminding them that they weren't alone. Her efforts didn't stop at the school gates. Determined to reach even more people, Maya decided to start a blog. At first, she wasn't sure anyone would care about her experiences. After all, she was just one girl from a small town. But as she poured her heart onto the page, writing candidly about her darkest moments and how she overcame them, readers began flocking to her site. Within weeks, her posts went viral, resonating with thousands of people around the world who saw pieces of themselves in her story. One particularly popular post titled, "How I Stopped Letting Bullies Define Me," struck a chord with readers of all ages. In it, Maya described the day Jake and his gang left her bruised and broken in the mud, and how that moment became the catalyst for change. "I realized I had two choices," she wrote. "I could let them destroy me, or I could rise above their cruelty and prove them wrong. I chose the latter, and you can too." The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers thanking Maya for inspiring them to stand up to their own bullies, whether those bullies were classmates, co-workers, or even family members. Parents praised her for giving their children the courage to speak out against injustice. Teachers reached out asking if they could use her blog posts as resources in their classrooms. Even mental health professionals highlighted her work, calling her an advocate for resilience and self-worth. Encouraged by the positive feedback, Maya expanded her platform. She started a YouTube channel where she shared videos about confidence building, exercises, coping strategies for dealing with negativity, and tips for fostering healthy relationships. Her videos were raw and authentic, often filmed in her bedroom with nothing more than her phone and a ring light. Yet, her sincerity shone through, making viewers feel like they were talking to a friend rather than watching a polished influencer. Soon, local newspapers caught wind of Maya's story. A journalist interviewed her for a feature article, which led to appearances on radio shows and TV segments. Before long, Maya found herself sitting across from talk show hosts, discussing topics like overcoming adversity, finding inner strength, and creating safe spaces for marginalized voices. Each interview brought new opportunities, including invitations to speak at conferences and community events. Despite her growing fame, Maya remained grounded. She refused to let success inflate her ego or distract her from her mission. Instead, she used her newfound visibility to amplify the voices of others. During one televised panel discussion, she invited several students from her school to join her on stage, giving them a chance to share their own stories of triumph over bullying. One boy recounted how Maya's support group helped him come out as gay without fear of rejection. Another girl spoke about overcoming an eating disorder after Maya reminded her that her worth wasn't tied to her appearance. Their testimonies moved the audience to tears, reinforcing the importance of compassion and solidarity. Back at school, Maya's impact was undeniable. The culture had shifted dramatically since the days when Jake ruled the hall. Words and whispers of cruelty echoed through the corridors. Now posters promoting kindness lined the walls, featuring slogans like, "Be kind, you never know what someone is going through," and "Respect starts with you." Teachers incorporated lessons on empathy into their curriculums, encouraging students to think critically about the consequences of their actions. Even former bullies began changing their behavior, realizing that cruelty only isolated them further. Jake, though still grappling with his reputation, made genuine efforts to turn things around. He joined the basketball team's mentoring program, working with younger kids to teach teamwork and sportsmanship. Occasionally, he'd cross paths with Maya in the hallway, nodding respectfully as she passed. While they weren't friends, there was mutual understanding, an acknowledgement that both of them had grown since their confrontation. Maya also took steps to address systemic issues contributing to bullying. She collaborated with the school administration to establish clearer guidelines for reporting incidents and holding perpetrators accountable. When a ninth grader reported being cyberbullied by classmates, Maya ensured the case was handled swiftly and fairly. The culprits faced suspension and mandatory counseling, sending a strong message that harassment wouldn't be tolerated. Outside of school, Maya's advocacy reached global audiences. Her blog gained millions of followers, many of whom credited her with helping them navigate difficult times. One reader named Emily wrote to thank Maya for saving her life. "Your post reminded me that I'm not worthless," Emily confessed. "When I felt like giving up, your words kept me going. Thank you for showing me that I have value, inspired." By such messages, Maya launched a nonprofit organization called Rise Stronger. Its mission was simple yet powerful: to empower individuals facing adversity by providing resources, mentorship, and a supportive community. Donations poured in from supporters worldwide, enabling Maya to fund scholarships, host free workshops, and distribute educational materials to schools in underserved areas. Through it all, Maya stayed true to herself. She still sketched in her notebook during quiet moments, imagining brave heroes fighting battles far greater than any playground scuffle. But now she understood that real-life heroes weren't defined by capes or superpowers. They were ordinary people who chose to act with courage and compassion, despite their fears. One evening, as Maya sat on her bed scrolling through emails from grateful readers, she reflected on how much her life had changed. Once a lonely girl hiding under an oak tree, she was now a force to be reckoned with, a symbol of resilience and hope for countless others. Yet, she knew her journey wasn't just about personal achievement. It was about lifting others up, proving that no matter how dark life seemed, everyone had the power to rise stronger than ever. Little did Maya know her story was far from over. As her influence expanded, so did the challenges she would face. But armed with unwavering determination and a heart full of purpose, she was ready to tackle whatever lay ahead. After all, She had already proven that even the smallest spark could ignite a fire capable of lighting up the world. Years passed, and Maya's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. What began as a quiet rebellion against bullies had evolved into a global movement that touched millions of lives. Her non-profit organization, Rise Stronger, became a beacon of hope for people everywhere, offering resources, mentorship programs, and safe spaces for those struggling with bullying, self-doubt, or adversity. But despite her success, Maya remained deeply connected to the roots of her journey, the pain, the fear, and the determination that had propelled her forward. By the time she graduated high school, Maya was no longer just a student. She was a public figure, an advocate, and a role model. She received scholarships from universities across the country, but instead of choosing the most prestigious institution, she opted for one closer to home. This decision allowed her to stay involved with her community while pursuing a degree in psychology, a field she believed would help her better understand human behavior and develop strategies to combat bullying on a deeper level. College brought new challenges, but Maya faced them head-on. Balancing academics, advocacy work, and personal growth wasn't easy, especially when critics began questioning her methods. Some accused her of being overly idealistic, claiming that kindness campaigns couldn't erase centuries of systemic oppression. Others dismissed her efforts as nothing more than feel-good activism, arguing that real change required radical action. At first, these criticisms stung, making Maya question whether she was doing enough. But then she remembered why she started this journey, not to please everyone, but to make a difference, however small it might seem. To silence her doubters, Maya doubled down on her efforts. She partnered with researchers to study the psychological effects of bullying and resilience, using data to refine her programs and ensure they were grounded in science. She collaborated with educators to design anti-bullying curriculums tailored to different age groups, emphasizing empathy, conflict resolution, and emotional intelligence. And she traveled extensively, speaking at conferences, schools, and community centers around the world, sharing her story and empowering others to rise above their struggles. One particularly memorable trip took her to India, where she visited rural villages plagued by poverty and social inequality. There she met children who faced unimaginable hardships, child labor, domestic abuse, and discrimination based on caste or gender. Despite their circumstances, many of these kids displayed remarkable resilience, finding joy in simple things like playing games with friends or learning basic literacy skills. Inspired by their strength, Maya launched a sister initiative called Rise Together, focusing on education and mental health support for marginalized youth. Back home, Maya continued expanding her reach. Her YouTube channel gained over 10 million subscribers, and her blog posts were translated into multiple languages, reaching audiences in countries as diverse as Brazil, Japan, and Kenya. Celebrities and influencers began endorsing her work, amplifying her message to even wider audiences. Yet, through it all, Maya stayed humble, always reminding herself that her platform belonged not just to her, but to everyone who had shared their stories and trusted her to amplify their voices. As her influence grew, so did the pressure to maintain her image. Journalists scrutinized her every move, dissecting her speeches and analyzing her social media presence. Critics pounced on any perceived misstep, accusing her of hypocrisy when she admitted to feeling overwhelmed or discouraged. For a while, Maya struggled under the weight of expectations, fearing that showing vulnerability would undermine her credibility, but then she realized something important. Perfection wasn't the goal. Authenticity was. In one candid video, Maya opened up about her own struggles with anxiety and imposter syndrome. "I'm not some untouchable hero," she told her viewers. "I get scared, I doubt myself, and sometimes I feel like giving up. But here's the thing, I keep going anyway. Because courage isn't about never feeling afraid, it's about moving forward despite your fears." Her honesty resonated deeply with her audience, earning her even more respect and admiration. People flooded her comment sections with messages of gratitude, thanking her for reminding them that it was okay to be human. One viewer wrote, You're not just teaching us how to stand up to bullies, you're teaching us how to stand up to ourselves. Maya's impact extended beyond individuals. It sparked institutional change as well. Schools adopted her anti-bullying curriculums, incorporating them into mandatory training sessions for teachers and staff. Corporations invited her to lead workshops on workplace harassment and diversity inclusion. Governments consulted her when drafting policies aimed at protecting vulnerable populations. Even tech companies sought her advice on combating online hate speech and cyberbullying. Despite her achievements, Maya never forgot where she came from. Every summer, she returned to her hometown to visit the old oak tree where she used to hide. During recess, sitting beneath its sprawling branches, she reflected on how far she'd come and how much farther she still wanted to go. Sometimes former classmates joined her, reminiscing about their shared past and marveling at how much the town had changed since Maya's rise to prominence. Jake, now working as a mechanic, occasionally stopped by to chat. Though their relationship remained cordial rather than close, they both acknowledged the positive shifts in their lives and credited Maya for inspiring them. One day, while scrolling through her email, Maya received an invitation that made her heart race. A renowned international conference focused on youth empowerment had asked her to deliver the keynote address. The event would take place in New York City, drawing attendees from over 50 countries. It was a dream come true, yet also daunting. How could she possibly capture years of struggle, growth, and triumph in a single speech? She spent weeks preparing, crafting her words carefully to ensure they conveyed both her personal journey and her broader vision for a kinder, more compassionate world. On the morning of the conference, she stood backstage, clutching her notes and taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. As she stepped onto the stage, the room erupted into applause, thousands of people rising to their feet to welcome her. "Thank you," Maya began, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. "When I was younger, I dreamed of escaping my reality. I imagined living in worlds where heroes fought villains and good always triumphed over evil. But as I grew older, I realized something important. We don't need magic wands or superpowers to create change. All we need is courage. The courage to believe in ourselves, to lift each other up, and to refuse to let cruelty define us." Paused, scanning the sea of faces before her. Some listeners nodded enthusiastically while others wiped away tears. "They thought they could break me," she continued, her tone fierce yet gentle. "But instead, they made me unbreakable. And today I want to remind you that you are stronger than you think. No matter what challenges you face, no matter how dark life seems, you have the power to rise above it all." The audience erupted into cheers, many chanting her name as she concluded her speech. Afterward, fans swarmed her, eager to meet the woman whose words had inspired them to overcome their own battles. Among them was Jake, standing awkwardly near the edge of the crowd. When Maya spotted him, she smiled warmly and waved him over. "I didn't know you'd be here," she said. "Surprised but pleased." "I wanted to hear your speech," Jake admitted, looking sheepish. "It was amazing. You've done incredible things, Maya. I'm sorry for everything I put you through back then." Maya studied him for a moment, seeing not the bully he once was, but the man he had become. A person capable of growth and redemption. "Thank you for saying that," she replied sincerely. "And thank you for changing. That takes real strength." Jake nodded, visibly moved. "You saved me too, in a way. If it weren't for you, I might still be stuck in that toxic mindset. So, thanks." With that, they parted ways, each carrying a renewed sense of purpose. For Maya, the encounter reinforced her belief in the transformative power of forgiveness and second chances. Everyone deserved an opportunity to rewrite their story, even those who had once caused harm. Today, Maya travels the world as a motivational speaker, author, and advocate for mental health awareness. Her memoir, Left to Die by Bullies, She Rose Stronger Than Ever, became a bestseller, inspiring readers to embrace their inner strength and confront adversity with grace and resilience. Through her nonprofit, she continues to empower marginalized communities, ensuring that no one feels invisible or alone. Though her journey has been long and challenging, Maya knows it's far from over. There will always be new obstacles to overcome, new injustices to fight, and new hearts to heal. But armed with courage, compassion, and an unshakable belief in the goodness of humanity, she remains steadfast in her mission. As she often tells her audiences, we may not be able to control what happens to us, but we can choose how we respond. And sometimes the hardest battles forge the brightest heroes. Maya's story proves that even the smallest spark can ignite a fire capable of lighting up the world. And though she started as a lonely girl hiding in the shadows, she emerged as a force of nature, stronger than ever, and determined to leave the world better than she found it.